Welcome everyone, back to a new episode of Cat's Eye on the Future. Sorry I missed everyone last week, but October tends to be a really busy time for psychics, and well, my other outside activities just sort of ate my life. But we're back for another shorter reading, one I hope you'll enjoy, while we look into what's going on in the world. I'd like to welcome back my listeners at the Time Monk Radio Network, Heathen Radio Network, and the UK Pagan Network. I really appreciate all of you, and I look forward to you enjoying this show, whether you're hearing it live or in the archives. And with that said, let's get on to the actual reading right after these short messages. All the music used on the show today is from musicalley.com, your source for free-to-air music for podcasts. The artists place their music up for free to air in hopes that you, the listener, will visit their site and purchase some of their outstanding musical offerings. So after the show, why not visit musicalley.com and explore their extensive playlist?
And she sings, she goes home in the evening with the dew all on her wings.
Have questions? The cards have answers. If you would like a personal reading with Melody, just go to my website, melodipsychicreadings.com. That's Melody with an I, psychicreadings.com for information, or email me at melodyreader@gmail.com. Readings are available using Skype, phone, email, or even in person if you are lucky to live in Ireland. Why not find out what special messages the cards have just for you and book a private reading today?
And see me from beneath the sea, the best in all of Ireland. See me from beneath the sea, the best in all of Ireland.
Welcome everyone, back to this shorter edition of Cat's Eye on the Future. Now I wanted you to know that I actually laid out and started looking at these cards on Thursday of this week. And it's actually Saturday of this week that I'm reading these cards. It's being a little bit tricky because world events, and especially those at the U.S. Congress, are moving ahead so quickly that it's difficult to keep a handle on things. But I'm going to do my best, mostly just to explain the energies, and then just bear with me as I make some kind of educated guesses as to what I think that might mean. Because the way things are changing so quickly, that could easily have changed by the time you're actually hearing this program. But just realize I'm doing my best several days in advance with an evolving and ongoing situation. That said, now, how did I phrase my question this week? What I said was, what are the most important energies and or events for this upcoming week of Monday, October 14th through Sunday, October 20th? And again, remember, when we're dealing with these kind of energies, they don't always start and stop immediately on the days in question, but primarily we're focusing on those. This time period, I think this is really important because I think these energies have already started to manifest far into the week before, which I didn't get to read for earlier because I had other commitments and simply wasn't home, so did not have a reading for this past week. Again, that said, what do we have here? Well, if you're following along at home, you can see the spread of the cards, and to do that, all you need to do is go to my website, melodipsychicreadings.com, and switch on the episode cards. I think this is episode 20. I'll have them up there by Monday. But this week, something slightly unusual happened when I went to put down the cards. The first two cards were pulled from the deck together, and I had an extremely strong urge to put the lower card actually in the first position, when normally it would have been the second card in the reading. Now, these cards are still face down. I can't see them. I don't know what they are. But over the years, I've learned not to ignore this sort of push from the universe. So I put the second card down first, making it the primary card of the reading. Now, if you've been following along with the cards at my website again, you can see that this makes the card now the foremost card of this reading, the one that colors all the cards to come. We've talked about that in the past, how the first card in a reading often, it sets the tone and it kind of overshadows and gives us the main emphasis for the reading. Now, if you can't see this card, the now card is a man harvesting a field of wheat under a late afternoon sun. As a symbol, the now card usually means that something is happening right now. So it's going to act as a time marker. It tells us we have the time in place. This is not something that's going to happen in the far future. This is either ongoing or something about to happen. The harvest imagery itself also hints at the fact that what is happening now is the harvest of what has gone or taken place in the past, or sort of what's been planted in the spring is now coming true in the fall. It also happens that in the Northlands we're in the fall time period, which kind of strengthens that even more, and I also think that this card is largely about things happening in the Northern Hemisphere. But again, this is just sort of a symbolic thing. If you live in Australia, it's still what is planted is being reaped, even though season-wise you may still be in the springtime. This is very important in terms of this reading, this whole harvest and planting symbolism, because in some ways it's sort of a secondary karma card, this now card. It's sort of as you sow, so shall you reap. Now there is an actual harvest card in this deck, and also a fate or wheel of fortune card. Neither of these show up in this reading, so the message isn't quite as strong as it would be if we had those cards as well. But we do have this sort of idea that what's happening is the results of things that have already been started or already planted. And we need to remember that because it's going to be important. So, but what's the next logical question with a now card? Well, that pretty much is, so now what? And the now what we have in focus is the card for friendship. This is the card with three friends sitting together in a pub. Now, for my North American listeners, especially in the United States, a pub in the UK or Ireland or any of the sort of Commonwealth countries or former Commonwealth countries is more or less a gathering place. It's not really a bar. In the States, a bar is kind of, or a nightclub is sort of where people go in the evening to have a drink and dance up and dance, but it's not quite the social gathering place that a pub is, especially in the daytime. And this card seems to be a pub in the daytime. So we have the three friends sitting in the pub, a location that for at least 1,000 years or more, villagers or folks living in the same urban neighborhood tended to get together. They go to have a pint of beer, ale, or cider, and they relax. I have cups of teas in pubs. It's not, the alcohol is not unimportant, but it's not the major reason for the location. Anyway, so on the card, there is a fourth hand that's coming out. We have the three friends sitting together. Then we have just this fourth hand with a picture that's holding a drink. And we simply don't know if this quote-unquote fourth friend who's coming in the picture really is a friend, if this person is going to join the group at the table, or just walk away. And if they do decide to join the group at the table, we don't know what they're likely to be affecting. Will they affect the energy of the three friends already there? Will they just join in fellowship and have a good time? Or will possibly they make things more complicated or even cause some discord? We can't tell. We just know there's this other energy that's out there. So the two cards together we have so far say that right now, friendship and friendships are going to be affected. Probably to a degree by decisions that were made in the past. And that's just being harvested now. I mean, that's just how it is. They're sort of friends are reaping what they have sown. Now the fourth friend, though, also adds another shadow of possibilities. Not all of which I think are yet set in stone. I think this is an evolving energy. But they're very much in play at the moment. I think the last three cards are really somewhat of a triad, and I'm going to read them together, and then pull them apart a bit to examine them more closely. What we have here is the Yes card. That's just a card with the word yes on it and some pretty decorations. Destruction, which we've seen before, and it's a picture of a horrifying bloody scene from the 17th century wars of religion in Europe. We'll go into that more later. And then the tree. The picture of a strong tree with roots and trunk and branches. It's this great image of this very strong tree, complete in its wholeness. So this reading seems to be to break into two logical parts. The first is the now friendship, which is the topic of the reading, and then the yes, destruction, and the tree as for what part of the friendship is being affected or addressed. In other words, we have now the friendship, but we have these three elements, the yes, destruction, and tree cards, that affect it. Before I go making any conclusions or bring in the runes, I want to look at these three cards a little more closely, though. First, as I said, is the yes card. It is a card with the word yes on it and that pretty pattern. It tends to mean that something is giving permission, or is given permission, or that the answer is yes. The flow of the universe seems to be going in a certain direction, which if it were alone with the friendship card would be a fantastic energy. If I was just doing a really short little 2-card reading for someone, and I do those sometimes in public, yes, friendship would be brilliant. You can also see the yes and no cards in this deck. You can use them for simple yes-no questions, though I very seldom do, because I feel like a 50% chance that it's going to be one or the other is a bit like gambling with the future. So I try to avoid it when I can, even though it's in the instructions on the box. I'm not saying I never use this technique with the deck, but I only do so sparingly, because again, then answers are just so much flip of the card. I think it's much better to have some cards around the yes or the no card to flesh it out a bit, which is what we've got here. Life is seldom all that simple, and it can be very hard to be absolutely certain what you're asking about when you just do yes and no. Additional cards tend to fill that out, and that's what we're doing, because we have the friendship on one side of the card, and then we have the destruction on the other, so it's not just all by itself. Because as I explained a couple of weeks ago, in a 5-card reading, the first card sets the real subject or tone, but this middle card, which in this case is the yes card, often makes the main point, and the ending card tends to either provide a resolution of sorts to the reading, or perhaps is our main focus going into the future. Looked at that way, we now have the now, friendship, yes, as things to focus on so far. So we know that now is the time, and friendship is yes, very much in the bullseye, or the focus of this current event reading. We already mentioned that, but again, we're now moving from just sort of overall energy into the current events area and what that could mean. Given that all these energies will be affecting everyone, though, to a degree, individuals are also likely to find a certain amount of focus on their personal friendships. And since we're reading about current events here, it's much more likely that the cards drawing us to friendships between people, tribes, nations, and governments and corporations, power blocks, etc. They're going to be the things, the alliances that are in the big picture in the news, but your own friendships and interactions are going to be important too. There may also be issues with the actual friendships or stories about friendships of famous people in the news. Unusual friendships. I think you're going to see lots of those, photos on Facebook with kittens and puppies, or, kittens and lizards, which I saw yesterday, or just, deer and bobcats, those kind of unusual combinations. They're always there, but they're going to be a little more focused. You might even see a big story along that line. We need to look at the last 2 cards before we all start thinking that this week is going to be sitting around the campfire, singing songs, roasting marshmallows on an international scale. On a personal level, that's a great way to celebrate this energy. Perhaps with the fire indoors if you're living in the Northern Hemisphere and getting an early start on winter, but on a greater, more macro level, I think the cards are flagging, some larger problems that may be coming up that can be solved by just everybody having a good group hug. That's because we have both the destruction and the tree card together making for the now. That now, the friendship, and yes, destruction, the tree, just doesn't look so good. There are obvious hints here of problems in the United States this coming week. And I mentioned yesterday, I'm reading this on Friday. I waited till Saturday because things have been so back and forth in this presidential deadlock. When with Congress about both the budget ceiling and possibly funding the U.S. government. When I went out to go shopping this morning, they were announcing that a deal had been done. But now that I'm back from shopping, it's off again. If this energy is as strong as it looks to be, it may be very hard for the U.S. Congress and administration to get their act together in time to prevent at least some of the destruction that may be happening to the tree, which we could look at in the case of the United States, maybe as the Tree of Liberty, or simply the tree as getting to the root of the problem, actually dealing with the situation as is, as opposed to this, yes, there's a deal, no, there's a deal, yes, there's a deal, no, there's a deal, that's changing like several times in one 24-hour period. Also, this tree as root of the problem can be read two ways. The positive use of this card combination would be if Congress were, say, to vote yes, sit down, and actually really work out some sort of compromise legislation that destroyed the actual root of the problem. In other words, it gets to the bottom of the things, and it really sorts things out. The good news is there is the energy around for them to do that if they chose to do so. And that goes for other conflicts and deadlocks around the world, especially those involving alliances, especially those in the West, where in many countries, like where I live in Ireland, next week is also budget week. It's a time period when pathways for the next year's spending programs and taxes are spelled out and finally decided upon in many places. And I should point out that Ireland last night also had one of those must be decided down to the wire meetings, which ended with no decision. So again, we sort of see this friendship having difficulty actually resulting in any actual construction, but instead seems to be just kind of in this destructive pattern. However, the flip side of this energy, that is the flip side from the positive, is also there. That for just saying yes to destruction of the tree itself, and that would be the worst case scenario. A less drastic version, something sort of in the middle of the either yes, we just let it all blow up and don't agree on anything, or yes, we actually solve the problem, would be saying yes to uniting in, quote, friendship, unquote, to prevent a short-term threat to the tree. Rather than getting to the roots of the problem, we just sort of pick the apples. Since I'm not reading specifically on the issue of either the U.S. Congress problem or that of Ireland, we can't be absolutely certain because we've got a more general world viewpoint here. But we're just getting what the cards want to flag. And I think the cards do seem to be pointing out this issue in the United States. I think particularly the debt ceiling issue and the possibility of a U.S. default, much more so even from the perspective of being outside the U.S. That's a lot more important than whether the U.S. can fund the Grand Canyon National Park or not. But going into default is a really big thing, and that is just really focusing the energy, because a lot of the world and nations of the world and their economic people are watching that. And it is going to be a focus this week, and it does have the potential to be incredibly destructive to both the tree and the homeland. Homeland. Where did that come from? Oh, I guess I jumped ahead of myself a bit. Once again, the runes echo the cards in an almost eerie fashion. They just do this sometimes when the universe really has a message. Because first we have the Monage rune. We've had this before. This is the rune of human partnerships. And together with the rune Othala, which literally means homeland, or inheritance, inherited lands, inherited wealth, we have a combination that just echoes the cards, like I said, in a really kind of very, very profound way. So, we have this human partnership and friendships flagged for next week. And we also have homelands, inheritance, inherited wealth, and to some extent the god Odin mixed up in this reading now as well. Interestingly enough, that Othala rune, as well as being sort of many times thought of the rune as Odin, can also stand for Germany or Greater Germany in a current events reading. That's because the Othala rune was kind of the beloved of 19th century Germanic revivalists, who used it as their symbol for the Greater German homeland. And today, many people would think of that kind of revised Greater Germany as the European Union, which even though it's made up of many different countries, and actually is headed in Brussels, it's still, Germany is probably the biggest player in terms of really wanting the union to happen in the first place, and continuing to try desperately to hold it together. To a lesser degree, we also have the kind of more northern states of the European Union as also being, not that they're part of Germany, but they're part of that more stable bloc. This combination of runes and cards suggests that a partnership within or about the EU is also likely affected by especially this yes destruction tree energy, possibly again going to the root of the problems and maybe affecting the friendships of the countries involved. It's highly unlikely that either the United States or the European Union is likely to totally destroy their partnerships and utterly break and fall apart next week. But there's going to be a lot of stress along those lines in those directions. Look for stories about succession or breaking apart or states in the US or countries in the EU starting to go their own way, especially on certain issues. That energy is there. That destruction friendship energy is there. What could be used as a focus to keep things together, that destruction card shows there's an awful lot also that is going to be tending to send things apart. What's really interesting about this reading is money is not directly flagged, suggesting the destruction of friendships that may go beyond this immediate currency and debt issues, that of the United States and elsewhere, and may actually be more focused on the issue of homelands themselves. Homelands, territories, properties, or perhaps even the inherited wealth of individual nations. And I think of Scotland, which is possibly going to be voting in the next couple of years on its independence, as an example of this. Scotland has a certain amount of its own natural resources, as do some of the other countries in the EU, which right now are either aligned as part of a larger semi-independent country or as part of as a state within the EU. And you're starting to think in terms of wanting to pass that down as their own legacy. So that's some of what's really at stake here, is what kind of friendship do they want to have? And is that fourth friend going to kind of come in and like really start to stir things up? And of course, wealth is not just about cash. In addition to the natural resources I've already mentioned, you have customs, ideas, traditions, common ideas, and in many parts of the world, even like common religion, or at least sort of state religion. And that is what a lot of times people think of as their nation or their own area. And again, there's this feeling of almost, again, wanting to retain back or continue to control certain things that are ours, as opposed to sharing, that is really coming out of this reading. The other really striking thing about this reading is that by and large, it suggests that major events this week are likely to be caused by the harmony or disharmony of human beings. That doesn't mean that nothing earth-based or natural is going to become an issue. I mean, right now, there's a huge, huge storm affecting India, and I'm sure that that is going to have a profound effect on India and the Indian people. But even so, some of the larger stories to come out of that may be the partnerships or ways that humans deal with the aftermath. That can be a real focus either for destruction and mayhem and problems like happened after the Sumatra quake and tsunami, or perhaps for moving forward, for new ways of cooperation. Yes to friendship as opposed to yes to destruction. The yes is the pivotal. It could go either way. And this is why this is a really important time period. I have to say, though, that I really, really don't like the yes destruction tree, especially homeland combo, that seems to be going on here. My suggestion to any world leaders, should by some miracle they happen to be listening to my show, is get your act together right now or else. The or else being a very strong threat to the foundations of the roots of your systems, your properties, and even your partnerships, treaties, and alliances. That's not coming from me. That's coming from these cards, and that's coming from these runes. It's like a big flashing warning sign saying you can say yes to friendship or you can say yes to destruction. Choose. Of course, destruction can often be creative. And those of you following the blog at my website, which most days when my internet experience is not being improved the way it has been this week by my provider, tends to be most weekdays. This week it's only been a couple of times, but it's still been there. And those of you reading it will know that the destruction turned up as a major theme this past week as well. Followed also by the themes for motherhood and birth. In the best case, the destruction forecast for this past week, the one that where you're hearing the show will have just passed by, could end up being something that's really that needs to be taken apart. Something that needs to be destroyed. And that could be going into this new week as well. It could need to be destroyed right down to the roots so it can be replanted. You know, just when you have a diseased tree, a fruit tree, sometimes you just have to take the whole thing out and plant a new one. Or if the wall is completely falling apart, you may need to take it all down and rebuild it back from the very foundation bricks so that it's stronger and potentially going to last many, many more years. So there is that part of destruction that we don't want to forget. However, you only have to look at the images on the destruction card itself. Priests lying dead in their own blood, people burned at the stake, castle walls on fire, cannons blasting, and soldiers caught in the worst sort of bloody hand-to-hand fighting that a person can or a being can know, to realize that destruction, even when ultimately creative or positive, is not often without serious and personal pain. So my hope is that this reading is really about human partnerships and friendships that, yes, gather together to protect the homeland and the tree from destruction, rather than bringing that destruction about. The energy is there for both. Again, it is for those nations and even us individuals to choose how we express it. One thing is for sure, this coming week is likely to be one of those close to the wire things, both in terms of the United States with its on-again, off-again attempts to try to deal with their own defaulting system before it actually crashes, and I suspect will be the most obvious places energy plays out, but also in other parts of the world as well. On a personal note, hold your friends close this week, and your personal homelands, I mean by that your own inherited lands, whether you're renting or you've lived in your family's farmstead for 500 years, you want to keep that personal home close to your chest and see it as a place of protection. It's a good week to stay there, or at least to, if you can't stay there literally, to stay there figuratively, in an emotional and a mental sense. Reach out to your close friends, but at the same time beware of friendships or partnerships that don't seem to be quite right somehow. Avoid attempts from outside forces or new people that may tend to bust up friendships. You know, if there's somebody new comes in and they fit right in, that's great, but trust your gut. If something doesn't seem right about a partnership you have or about someone new coming in, just don't play into it this week. When possible this week, walk away from arguments that may be close to the surface, as this is just not a good week for solving interpersonal issues. Some weeks have really good energy for that. This is not one of them. In fact, this is a week that can easily lead to blow-ups and other sorts of misunderstandings, one that could be bad enough to result in the loss of friendships or even worse. So just, when possible, don't go there. When confronted, try to disengage when you can, remembering that soft words sometimes, this isn't quite as bad as a beast week like we had a few weeks ago where absolutely nothing works, but just do your best to try, like I say, to stay disengaged. Mainly, I think this is a week when outside and macro problems are just going to be on the minds of a lot of people. Not everybody, because some people, they just don't pay attention to the news at all. But this is a week when enough people are going to be kind of nervous and skitty and easy to react that it's going to make everybody just kind of twitchy. It's going to be really bad, I think, for people that are empathic and other types of sensitives who may actually have an especially hard time dealing with this constant pressure from the emotions and upsets of everyone around them. And those energies are going to be pushing again on those partnerships that they have and those of others. And so again, it's that same, so if you are really sensitive, just realize you may need to take extra time to take care of yourself, get enough sleep, have enough to eat, and work on your protection exercises if you need to. If it gets really bad, envision a white light around yourself, one that's reflective and just sends everything back out that's coming at you. So if it's good things people are sending, they'll get good things back. If it's bad things, well, they may get rebounds, but it's not all sucking up inside of you. Being an empath, as I know from personal experience, is a really powerful gift, but in times like this, particularly when you really can't do anything to help, it's just distracting. So just again, try to stay focused, try to realize what emotions are yours, and what are those of other people, and just kind of filter out, keep your own as calm as you possibly can, and keep those of others at bay when possible. And do try to avoid the universe's seeming call for a revolution at the moment. Or if you can't, let your creative destruction be limited to personal habits you might want to be breaking anyway. You know, like this would be a great time to quit smoking, or some other kind of activity that you may have come to view as personally destructive that you wish to quit. Great. Or you can use this kind of energy to pull out the weeds in your garden, declare war on dust bunnies under the bed, but not your best friend, or even Congress, at least not as an actual fact. Because with this last bunch, let's wait and see what they actually do first. Then, next week may be the time for declaring, figurative war on them. But right now, just try to avoid doing that if you can. It's not going to help anything, I don't think. And it's just, if you put that kind of mixed up energy into an already volatile situation, it just may make it worse. Now, next week's show may be an interview. I'm not sure yet, as I have a couple people lined up, but we're not sure when those interviews are going to take place. With my healthily improved internet service, I can't really do much. In fact, I'm recording offline right now, and hopefully I'll be able to send this before the show deadline. But once things get worked out, I do have several people that will be on the show. If it isn't an interview, it'll probably be a short show reading, because I really want to keep caught up on this and see where things are headed. Even if we have an interview, I may do a little short bit, or I may just put something up at my website and say, go here for a follow-up, because I think this is one of those pivotal tipping point periods where things could go either way. Again, the energy could be for the use of friendship that improves things, or the destruction of friendship that proves very volatile. And we just don't know which way it's going to go yet. So stay tuned. I will be keeping people updated, if not here on the show, then on my blog. Unfortunately, I may need to show early again next week, because again, other commitments I have. October just tends to be like this for psychics. My whole month of October is basically shot in terms of being able to stretch things out all that late. So my best advice again is to follow the blog, and if things look to me like they're changing fast, and everything is roller coastering, I may put up more than one small up thing a day. So just keep your eyes on it. It'll be there if it can. Anyway, we'll see. Thanks for joining me this week on our shorter format. Remember, I'm trying to take personal questions for use on the longer shows, though I suspect to only be doing shorter shows and interviews through this month of October. Next week's show may be an interview. I'm not sure yet, as I have a couple of people lined up, but not sure when the interviews will be taking place. Unfortunately, I may have to do some of my shows a little bit early because of other commitments. October is usually a very busy time for psychics, and I'm no exception. So just try to bear with me. I will try to keep people posted. To sum up, I really do think this week is a tipping point, and possibly the next week after. A lot of things are going to be decided this week, both in front of and behind the scenes, but a lot more of them in front of the scenes this week, I think, that are going to be really important for the next few months at least, possibly longer. It's very highly likely that they could just kick the can down the road a bit, both in the U.S. and other places. But there's that recurring theme of destruction of the root of the tree. If these issues are not dealt with now, they're going to continue to rot and destroy things in an unfortunate way. So let's hope for resolutions. Let's hope that friendship wins up over destruction. And if I will either see you next week or sometime very soon, take care and see you next time for Cat's Eye on the Future.
Well, here's a health to the company and one to my lass.
You have been listening to Cat's Eye on the Future, the show where we take a glimpse of the energies coming soon into your world and into your future. Be sure to join us again next time when we explore another chapter of Cat's Eye on the Future.
Again, but here's a health to the company and one to my last. Let us drink and be merry.